Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Well, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we will be discussing a few things of interest. One of them, President Obama received the Nobel Peace Prize. He actually got the thing in his hand. And he made a speech. Sounded like a speech of war, not a speech of peace. We are going to go over a few of the highlights in his speech and see if he really deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. And what the heck is a Nobel Peace Prize anyway? You know, the guy who invented the TNT and explosives, Nobel, that is, you know, he's the one that is responsible for, I guess, everyone who died of explosions and bullets. But anyway, the Nobel Peace Prize is supposed to be for someone who's saving lives, not someone who's actually, I guess, consuming them. Well, you know, one of the industries, ladies and gentlemen, that is really thriving in this country, it is the only industry that is thriving in this country. It is the military-industrial complex. Of course, you know that term, President Eisenhower, he termed that way back in 1944 actually, when he did talk about the military-industrial complex. Except, of course, you know, these days it's not just really a military-industrial complex that we need to worry about, because the military-industrial complex, it's also part, it is not just military and it's not just industrial, but it's also media. Oh yes, it's got a lot to do with the media, because the same people who are manufacturing bombs are the same people who are covering where those bombs are falling. And of course, you know, the only industry really that is thriving right now is the military. It's those hundreds of thousands of companies that are making their livings supporting the military. You know, there are about 37,000 companies that are like the main core, that they supply like the main things, gadgets, tanks, airplanes, machines, submachine guns. No, actually, no, submachine guns. It's automatic, fully automatic. Bombs, drones, computers to go along with this stuff. And also, besides that industry and including the media, then we also included academia. So now we have a complex web of academia. Universities are in bed with the military. The media in bed with the military, because the same companies that happen to own the weapons companies, they also own the media, and they also have interest in universities and research. Well, there was a meeting, ladies and gentlemen, last Friday in New York. And that meeting, it's 30 people. You know, you have the G8. You remember the G8? That's like the most industrialized nations. They meet. Now they are the G8 plus one, because they added Russia. That's the plus one. And then we had the G20. Remember, they were meeting in London over the summer. And one that you don't really hear a lot about is the G30. That is number 30. Well, these are basically the people who decides where the money goes in the world. You know, they are the directors of the International Monetary Fund. They are the directors of the World Bank. They are the governors of central banks, like the Bank of Japan and Bank of Brazil and all these. You know, you have these people. But there was something. Now, I want to tell you who the group of 30 is, because it is interesting that Israel pops up in there. The chairman, and that is picture 19, the chairman of this group, the G30 group, is Paul Volcker. And we do have his picture, picture 19. Let's go ahead and put his picture up. Now, this man is the chairman of the G30 group. He is also the head of the President Obama Recovery Board. Just keep that in mind. He is the chairman of the G30, and at the same time, he is the head of the Obama Recovery Team. Now, with him in this group, I'm not going to go over everyone, but two in particular, or actually, two more. Let's go to 21. Now, this guy is Jacob Frenkel. Jacob Frenkel, he was the ex-chairman of AIG. Remember the big conglomerate that the taxpayers have bailed out? Yeah, the guy on the right. Of course, everyone knows who the guy on the left, Greenspan. He's probably the one who sent us through disasters after disasters after disasters, responsible for the mess we are in. But this guy talking to him is Jacob Frenkel. He is the ex-vice chairman of AIG. Trillions of dollars taxpayers had given to correct what this guy had done. But interestingly enough, that this guy actually also was the former governor of the Bank of Israel. The Bank of Israel. And if you remember when this big mess with AIG, $400 billion evaporated overnight, and we told you about it at that time, and we told you where that money went. But we did not know that there was actually a relationship. Now, we told you where the money is, and on YouTube, if you go on YouTube and you just put my name in there and just say, where did our money go? You will see the YouTube, what we did, and told you where the money went. It went to Israel. Now, with this meeting last Friday with this G30 and this guy, now we know, actually, because this guy was the governor of the bank, of the Central Bank of Israel. Now, if you know what governor means, it's not like a governor of a state. That is like the big guy who controls everything when it comes to money. So he was the governor of the state, of the Central Bank of Israel, and also the ex-vice chairman of AIG. Another guy, picture 22, is Stanley Fischer. Stanley is a former director with the IMF. He's pictured here with the current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the pickled former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who's still somewhere in a coma, I guess between earth and hill. But this Stanley Fischer, actually he was a director with the International Monetary Fund. And if you go to picture 23, he is also pictured with Omrit, the former Israeli Prime Minister who Netanyahu replaced. Well, this guy happened to also be the current governor of the Bank of Israel, the Central Bank of Israel. So now let's see, in this meeting, the G30 meeting that was Friday, we had two ex-governors of the Central Bank of Israel. Greenspan, Bernanke, the Federal Reserve Chairman, was there. And many other people. Like we said, some of them were the ex-president of the Central Bank of Brazil, Arminio Fraga. And this guy happens to also be the managing director of Soros, that's George Soros Fund Management. Now, you've got to understand something. Now, we do have people on the left, we have people on the right. We have Republicans, we have Democrats, we have conservatives, we have liberals. But when it comes to controlling the world, they're one. Yeah, you will see George Soros and his cronies in bed with the neocons and the Zionists. You will see them. When it comes to controlling the world, controlling the money on top, yes. And then you add to the mix Paul Volcker, who we talked about on picture 19, which is the head of the Obama Recovery Board. These are the guys who are cooking this whole thing. These are the guys who are basically deciding how and where and when the money is to be taken away from you and given to somebody else. Now, let's go ahead and just to show you how this stuff, and there was other people in there, you know, like the governor of the Bank of England, the San Francisco Fed president, you know, the city group chairman, etc., etc. And included with that is Paul Krugman of Princeton. Now, Paul Krugman, you know, he's of Princeton University, and also he is the he's always on New York Times on the opinion. Paul Krugman, you see him all over TV, and you read many of his articles. But he never told you that he's part of this group. So it's the same people who decide way on top. They filter down to tell you in the media with their editorials, because they control everything. It's a cycle. Let's go ahead and put that graph. We're going to explain to you. There's a graph where it's like a cycle. This one here. Now, if you look on the bottom right-hand side corner where it says defense contractors, well, the defense contractors, they very much, you know, who do they control? They control TV, radio, and newspapers. They control jobs. They control positions of subcontractors. They control also campaign contributors. So they do control. They give money to our congressmen and women, our senators, presidential campaigns. They are controlling the media and where you get your information from, which they end up controlling who? The voters, if you follow the arrows up there. Now, the voters vote who in? They vote senators and congressmen. And then the members of these armed service committees or services committees. Then you have the lobbyists in there to kind of keep all the links together, to make sure there is no link broken off there somewhere. And then you have who control spendings, which is basically the congressmen. So if these people, if these defense contractors control the media, control you, the voters, through their work, they control and positions through their subcontractors, they control campaign contributions. So very much what Eisenhower had warned us about back in 1944, and he did not even see what they're doing now. He was speaking about what was going on back in 1944. Ladies and gentlemen, the only industry that we have right now that is making money is the defense contractors. is the military-industrial complex. If we stop this war, the economy will tank. The economy, well, you're going to say, well, the economy, is it going to get any worse than this? Yes. Imagine, and the way it's divided, put the map of the United States on. Imagine, because, you know, you probably can't see some of this stuff in there, but this stuff has a lot of, like, tanks and missiles and guns and bombs and ships and everything. Now, the United States is saturated with the military-industrial complex. There is not even one state or one major city, or even minor city for that reason, in the United States that does not have anything to do with defense, with the military-industrial complex. If it is, I mean, there are 37,000 major contractors and 100,000 minor or subcontractors for the Defense Department and the military-industrial complex. Now, when you have these people and these companies and these subcontractors all over the country, and with the way that the economy is now, there is no way on earth that the United States can afford to stop the war, because we are in a catch-22 situation here. We are in a very bad predicament here. What do? How do we stop a war that is actually keeping the economy going? And then we have our president who goes and receives the Nobel Peace Prize. How in the world does this happen? How do you give a peace prize to a country that just finished killing 1 million Iraqis, and that just finished, or they're still killing Afghanis? This war is bringing us down to our knees, and this is going to benefit somebody. So who wants us dead? Who wants the United States on its knees? Who wants the United States bankrupt? Because it's going to come time when the United States cannot just go on making wars so we can have jobs. But how do we stop it? Listen to our general, Admiral Mike Mullen. That's picture 19. No, I'm sorry, 20. Mike Mullen, this is what he said. He said, "This is the most dangerous time I have seen growing up the last 4 decades in uniform." No, 20. This is what Admiral Mike Mullins said. He said, "This is the most dangerous time I have seen growing up the last 4 decades in uniform." He told an audience of soldiers and Marines, some of whom are weeks away from flying to conflict. He said, "We are not winning, which means we are losing. And as we are losing, the message traffic out there to recruits keeps getting better and better, and more keep coming." That is, he's talking about the recruits for the insurgencies, the recruits for the Taliban that we are fighting for some reason, the recruits for the people in Iraq to resist this occupation and to resist the regime that was established and put in place by our administration, George Bush. Now, what did Barack Obama say in his acceptance speech? He said, "But perhaps the most profound issue," yes, Barack Obama accepting the Nobel Peace Prize, He said, perhaps the most profound issue surrounding my receipt of this prize is the fact that I am the commander-in-chief of a nation in the midst of two wars. Yeah, it's pathetic. Wait until he finishes the war. Wait until we see how many lives he saves before we go and give him a peace prize. And before we give America the Nobel Peace Prize. For what? This is pathetic. This is shameful. He said, one of these wars is winding down. He's talking about the war in Iraq. No, it is not. It hasn't even started yet. Yes. The goal for Iraq is the destruction of Iraq. The goal for Iraq is the division of Iraq into 3 or 4 different states. Because that's what the plan, that's the Zionist plan, that's what Israel planned. It's written down. Just go look up Israel's plan for the Middle East and you will see exactly what they said. Israel Shahak, the late Israel Shahak, has published the plan. He translated the plan into English, which was translated into Arabic and translated into many, many languages. What is going on in Iraq is an Israeli objective in its own right, like they wrote in the clean break document. He said the other conflict is a conflict that America did not seek, talking about Afghanistan. Well, the Taliban did not come and attack. We don't know who planned 9/11. There are many, many, many flaws in the government story of 9/11, and 8 years later, they still refuse to have an independent, and he can't, Obama can't. You know, during the campaign he did mention, but they shut him off, they shut him down right away. Don't even think about it. Having an independent investigation of 9/11. Can we have an independent investigation of 9/11 to see exactly who bombed us, who planned it? What is Israel's role in all of this? You've got to tie in all these points that we have been talking about in the last 8 years. The economic war that we told you about 5 years ago, we told you the dollar is being devaluated. What that means, and you have probably, a lot of you out there have no clue what devaluing the dollar means. It means the value of the dollar is not there anymore. 10 years ago, if you had $100,000 in the bank, right now they're worth about $50,000. That's what it means. We told you about this. We told you that the war we are going to lose, and lose miserably, is the economic war that we are in the midst of right now, and losing it. And on top of that, we are losing the conventional war. Do you know how many bombings are in Iraq just this past week? Yesterday, 124 people died. 5-car bombings. He said, still, we are at war, and I'm responsible for the deployment of thousands of young Americans to battle in a distant land. Some will kill, some will be killed. Can you imagine this is a speech, an acceptance speech for a peace, a Nobel Peace Prize? The man is standing right there and telling the world, I am responsible for the deployment of thousands of young Americans to battle in a distant land. Some will kill. Oh, what peace. Some will be killed. And so I come here with an acute sense of the cost of armed conflict, filled with difficult questions about the relationship between war and peace, and our effort to replace one with the other. Well, you're not doing much of an effort if you are sending 30 more thousand troops over there with these drones that are controlled by somebody sitting behind a computer. See, this is the thing. When you used to fight with a sword, or even when you used to fight and shoot the guy in front of you, probably, you know, people used to see what's going on in wars. Right now we send drones, unmanned aircrafts to bomb civilians. And civilians died many times by some guy sitting in San Francisco thinking that he is playing a video game. That's exactly what is going on. This is the peaceful country. We just won the Nobel Peace Prize. Congratulations, America. You just won the Nobel Peace Prize. At the same time, you're still killing. Thank you very much for killing 1 million Iraqis. You deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. What else he said? You know what? I don't want to continue with what he said, because his speech was pathetic. He should not have accepted this Nobel Peace Prize. He should have told them, no, you made the wrong decision. Give it to me if I stop the war. This is from Iraq. You tell me what peace you are looking at. You're looking at pieces, not peace. In Afghanistan, even American boys and girls coming back. For what? Is this a peaceful nation? For what? The war? For what? Well, the G30 and those who are or who met the governors of the Bank of Israel, they're responsible for that. Now, who's Greenspan? He's an Israeli firster. Who is Ben Bernanke, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank? An Israeli firster. Who are the people that started the Iraq War? Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Perle, Douglas Feith. Who are these people? Fox Network, the media. They don't cover the war, they make wars. The media is the marketing arm of the military-industrial complex. The media is the marketing arm because they bring you this war on your TV and they scare you of some mirage out there. Terrorism. Terrorists. What the hell is it? Osama bin Laden. Robert Gates, the American Defense Secretary. Let's call him War Secretary, because it's not Department of Defense, it's Department of War. He said in the last few years we have not had not even one single solid information about bin Laden. We told you here many times over. Bin Laden is gone. Bin Laden is gone. He's been gone for a long time. Bin Laden is not the one we're fighting. Come on, billions of dollars? And we can't even get one man on a kidney dialysis? The guy was dying. The guy was 2 weeks before 9/11, 2 months actually, before 9/11. He was in a hospital, dying. In Dubai. And our chief CIA in Dubai, operative, he met with bin Laden 2 months before 9/11. Who planned 9/11? Who has the capacity? Who has the money? It's these same people who are meeting in New York. Because they're controlling your life, my life, everybody's life. These are the people. Now, who are they? Israel firsters. Jews. Jews, yes. Yes. We're not being anti-Semitic here. They are. The names. What they're doing, their positions. The governors of the Central Bank of Israel controlling us right here, because they're the ones who are deciding. The vice chairman of AIG, the former governor of the Central Bank of Israel. Does any of this stuff really ring a bell in your head? Do you know where we headed? No, you don't. Let's go to the phones with Freedom on line 1. Freedom, welcome to the program.
Dr. Tillawi, the show you have on tonight is an excellent show because we are looking at 1984. This is George Orwell's time. War is peace, and peace is war. You know what I mean? This whole thing is driving me out of my mind as a Vietnam era veteran. But look, last night on True TV, channel 51 on your cable system, Jesse Ventura did an investigation of 9/11, and the thing that you and I have been talking about for a while, what happened to the black boxes. They concentrated on that a while last night. They concentrated on thermite and what that could do. And if any Americans like you and I saw the show last night, if any congressman or any U.S. senator saw those shows last night, that should make it clear that this was not a plot by bin Laden. This should make it absolutely clear that this was an inside job. Because where are the black boxes? Why don't you reveal what the black boxes were, what kind of language was being spoken?
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. So please concentrate on that tonight, and I'm going to continue listening to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Jesse Ventura, you know, he's a latecomer into the truth movement. He was the governor of, Minnesota. And he's a latecomer. You know, the only problem I have with Jesse is he's very much tied into Alex Jones, and I'm not really too crazy about Alex Jones because Alex Jones so many times he had given wrong information, period. And one thing about Alex Jones, he will not touch the Israeli angle. In the truth movement, you cannot pick and choose what angles you are going to concentrate on. In the truth movement, you've got to tell the truth. Before we talk about, and we've talked to Governor Ventura about a year ago. That is one subject he will not touch. And we talked about it. That's one subject he will not touch. And it's a main subject. What is Israel's role in this whole thing? What is Israel's role in this whole thing? You know, everything that I did not see the thing about you know, the program on True TV with Jesse Ventura. But you know what? If we had the money and the backing that Jesse had, we could have done a much better job with much better information than Jesse did, but we don't have it. We don't have the money. We can't travel to all these places. We don't have the thousands of dollars to go along with it. We don't have a team of photographers and investigators to go. But he did not come up with anything. Everything he talked about, we did cover on this program. Now, I want to go ahead and play a video, then we'll come back to the phones of about the military-industrial complex, about what Israel's role is in all this. Let's go ahead and play it, and we'll come back.
Of lowering that rate for the first time ever. Could U.S. Treasury bonds soon rate as junk bonds? Here with us to discuss this is Steve Forbes of Forbes on Fox, among other things. Peter Schiff, author of Crash Proof, and no, that's George Gilder, author of about 150 books and chairman of Gilder Kremers Fund. And we're going to start with Steve Forbes because this article really sort of jumped out at me. It was on the cover of Financial Times, where we heard that Moody's, which hasn't been rating all that well, they rated a lot of subprime debt pretty poorly, but they are thinking of...
It could be a sign of the bottom.
It could be a sign of the bottom, right, but is it conceivable that what they say about the United States is correct, that we may deserve a lower rating as a country?
Well, we certainly deserve a junk bond rating in the way the government has treated the dollar. No great country should have a junk currency, and the policy of the Treasury...
By the way, when he said this, George Bush was the president.
...of the dollar on the mistaken theory that strengthens the economy by boosting exports. But you see, on the housing side and elsewhere, it creates huge distortions within the economy. No president since Jimmy Carter has trashed the dollar as much as this administration. And what they should do is shore up the dollar, forget about pegging interest rates, soak up some of the excess liquidity, defend the dollar, and by golly, you'll see the equity markets rally.
Of course, we just heard our guest before talking about how what we need are more rate cuts right now.
Forget the Fed trying to manipulate interest rates. What the Fed should do is preserve the integrity of the dollar, same with the Treasury Department. If it does that, the markets will rally and short-term interest rates will come down on their own because the dollar won't be going down in value.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Can't have it.
Can't have it. I said, you said you had some grudges. Who are your grudges against?
Well, number one, and my wife constantly reminds me to tone down. I brought that guy back from Israel, John Deminick. It was my Freedom of Information Act which proved not only he was innocent, but who Ivan really was. The case was so sensitive, members of Congress would say, Jim, I love you, but please, don't involve me. I sent my evidence to the 6th Circuit Court in Cincinnati. They wouldn't accept it. I finally sent it over to Israel, to the Israeli Supreme Court, and they called me over there, and I went with the family. I did a live interview satellite with Brian Gumbel, and I said, when they put this innocent man to death, they're going to lose $15 to $20 billion every year they get from the American taxpayers. And Brian Gumbel says, what are you talking about? They only get $3 billion. And I said, Brian, that's only the foreign aid bill. Look at all the other trade compacts, economic assistance, military assistance. I'm saying this to you right now. Israel gets approximately $15 billion a year from the American taxpayers. That $15 billion is $30,000 for every man, woman, and child. And people in my district are losing their pension benefits. So I was targeted big time.
By the Israelis.
The Israeli Supreme Court looked at the evidence, could not refute it. And it came from the Justice Department, Greta. And they said, take him home. I brought him home, and he was bombarded ever since.
Home to Ohio.
Now he's in Germany fighting for his life. Now let me say this. Prosecutor Moskowitz of the OSI office of the United States Justice Department suborned perjury with Otto Horn. The documents clearly state who Ivan the Terrible was, a man named Ivan Marchenko, not Demjanjuk. And they had to release him. And now they can't live with it. They couldn't live with Jim Trafficant, having beaten him in 1983. I was a walking symbol of defiance. And now they have this man in Germany. And if someone doesn't look into this, the American people should be ashamed of themselves. When you allow one American to be violated, you threaten the freedoms of every American. And I can't understand this, why no one in Congress is raising their voice. And the reason is very simple. And this may be you don't want to hear, I don't know. And I certainly don't want to hurt you on your show. You have one of the best. You're fair. But I believe that Israel has a powerful stranglehold on the American government. They control both members of the House and the Senate. They have us involved in wars of which we have little or no interest. Our children are coming back in body bags. Our nation is bankrupt over these wars. And if you open your mouth, you get targeted. And if they don't beat you at the poll, they'll put you in prison.
Explain to me what you see as why you target and why you have a grudge against the Israelis.
The grudge is not necessarily a grudge. It's an objective assessment that no one will have the courage to speak about. They're controlling much of our foreign policy. They're influencing much of our domestic policy. Wolfowitz, as Undersecretary of Defense, manipulated President Bush #2 back into Iraq. They pushed definitely to try and get Bush before he left to move into Iran. We're conducting an expansionist policy of Israel, and everybody's afraid to say it. They control much of the media, they control much of the commerce of the country, and they control powerfully both bodies of the Congress. They own the Congress.
Are you an anti-Semite?
No, I'm not. That's exactly what they're going to say, and I expect that. What I am is an American.
And you see, one of the big problems is, and here goes the grenade, Israel. The second you mention the word Israel, the nation Israel, the concept Israel, many in the American press become very defensive. We're not allowed to be highly critical of the state of Israel. And the other thing we're not allowed to do is discuss the notion that Israel and the notion of Israeli interests may in fact be dictating what America is doing. That what we're doing in the Middle East may not be to the benefit of America's national security, but to Israel's national security. But see, we don't want to talk about that because one of the great success stories out there is the pro-Israeli lobby that has successfully enabled themselves to blend the two together so that when we speak of Israeli interests, they say, no, we're speaking of American interests. It's interesting that AIPAC and other elements of the Israeli lobby don't have to register as agents of a foreign government. It would be nice if they did, because then we'd know when they're advocating on behalf of Israel or they're advocating on behalf of the United States of America. I would challenge the New York Times to sit down and do a critical story on Israel, on the role of the role that Israel plays in influencing American foreign policy. There's nothing wrong with Israel trying to influence American foreign policy. And we make that clear. The British seek to influence our foreign policy. The French seek to influence our foreign policy. The Saudis seek to influence our foreign policy. The difference is when they do this and they bring American citizens into play, these Americans, once they take the money of a foreign government and they advocate on behalf of that foreign government, they register themselves as an agent of that government so we know where they're coming from. That's all I ask the Israelis to do. Let us know where you're coming from, because stop confusing the American public that Israel's interests are necessarily America's interests.
Okay? Israel's interests are not America's interests. As a matter of fact, Israel's interests are the opposite of America's interests. Richard Pearl, on September 12, 2001, visited the White House the day after 9/11. The CIA chief, George Tenet, he went to see the president early in the morning. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning. And he thought he was there early. Richard Pearl was leaving the White House. They met right there at the door. Richard Pearl looked at George Tenet and told him, Iraq must pay for this. George Tenet looked at him as, what is he talking about? Iraq must pay for this. We have no clue of who attacked us. And this man is saying, were the Iraqis who attacked us? George Tenet, the director of the CIA, the man who's supposed to know everything. Richard Pearl meeting him. Now, Richard Pearl is a Jew, is an Israeli. He was way on top in the government of George Bush. He was a policy maker. He was a decision maker. Iraq, the one who actually had an 8-year battle with Iran, because the United States felt that the Iranian Revolution should not expand beyond the borders of Iran. And we supported Saddam Hussein back in the 80s because he was the first line of defense in the Americans' battle against the revolutionary regime in Iran, the Khomeini regime. So we supported, the United States government supported Saddam in that war because the United States government felt that Saddam was fighting the America's war to protect America's interests. In 2003, the United States attacks Iraq. The country that was the first line of defense, we break that first line and we allow the Iranians to move in and do whatever they want to in Iraq. We even installed a government. When I say we, the United States of America, installed a government that is pro-Iranian in Iraq. We started the United States CIA and the British MI5s and MI6 and the Israeli Mossad. They started bombing Shiites and Sunnis. They enticed violence between the groups. Now Iraq is being divided, just as Israel wants. Just as Israel wants. And who is to protect the American oil in the Gulf states? The American oil that somehow got underneath the Arab sand from Iran? Not the Americans. Now, whose benefit is that? No one except the Israelis. It is not good for the Arabs. It is not good for America. It is not good for anyone else except the Israelis, because they wanted it. They talked about it. The removal of Saddam Hussein from power was the objective. Was an Israeli objective. These are the people. These are the people that wanted to weaken the United States, because they cannot become a superpower as long as they have to answer to the United States. So they are going to milk the United States until there's no more milk left in it. If I was an Egyptian, I probably would file a lawsuit against Israel to bring back all the silver and gold they stole from the Egyptians when they left Egypt with Moses. There's an irony there, ladies and gentlemen. There's an irony there. Are we being robbed of our wealth. Remember, $400 billion went to Israel overnight from AIG. The chairman of which was the former chairman of the Bank of Israel, the governor of the Bank of Israel. These are the people who are playing with our money, with our future, with your future. Now, how long is it going to be before we find ourselves like the Egyptians with nothing? How long is it going to be? You don't see it. Because I'm not on Fox and I'm not on CNN, and they will not put me on Fox and CNN. You don't see it because they control the media. They tell you the garbage they want to tell you. They bring you your president, nice looking gentleman, accepting the Nobel Peace Prize, and you feel so good about it. All day long you probably felt, wow, America got the Nobel Peace Prize. For what? For what? Let me go to line 2 with Amigo on line 2. Amigo, you're up. You're up. Turn down your TV, please.
Hello, sir?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Okay, happy holidays, you and your family.
Same to you and yours.
What a show, Doc. Listen, I need to ask you a question. Well, a couple of questions, and then I'm going to hang up and I want your take on this. First of all, though, before let me make a statement. I just love that little episode you just gave on what Loretta said and the Representative Triton. But you've been saying this for 8 years.
True.
The same identical things they said, you've been saying it to us for 8 years. So I applaud you, Doc. You did your research. I applaud you. Okay, here's the 2 questions. What happened to Lou Dobbs? Weeks ago, I know he's been gone, but I never could get you. You know, the line be tied up, and so I don't worry about, you know, until I can get you like I just did now. I'm talking fast because I'm looking at the time. Okay, what happened to Lou Dobbs? And now, you know that couple that sneaked in the state party a couple of weeks ago?
Yes.
I'm thinking, here's my analogy. You know, sometimes it's dumb, but that's what I think sometimes. It might be dumb to some people. My analogy is this. Like these people you've been showing tonight, with Obama smiling with the guy with the bald head, you know, and all that stuff. Okay, I think when he got in office, he said, okay, let me tell you something, man. All right? You're going to play ball with us or else.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
He didn't. No. Listen, amigo.
Who knows what goes down?
He did not get in office. He was put in office.
That's right. But wait. I know they had closed doors meeting with him, those Israelis.
Oh, of course. Of course.
Those Zionists and said, listen, you better play ball with us. Now, wait a minute. Here's an example. They showed him, here's my analogy. They showed him, better than they could tell him, how can you pass that heavy security, that couple? Now, why, they're going to make a mockery out of it and all that stuff. That couple not even worried about going to jail or be prosecuted by that.
Nah.
That's what Zionists sending Obama a message. You better not. Here's what we can do.
Hey, you know, you might be.
My analogy might be wrong. I'm going to let you respond.
Appreciate it.
You and your family.
Appreciate it. Thanks, amigo. Well, you know, you could be right. Probably we're telling them, look, we got these people in. We can't let other people in. I never thought about it that way. I never actually heard of anyone analyzing it that way. 10 points for amigo. I mean, hey, it could be. All right, I'll tell you what. We got like a minute left or so. Let's go to my favorite caller, Larry, on line 1.
Tillawi.
Yes, sir.
Talked about the black boxes of 9/11.
Mm.
I heard that when they opened one of them, a Jew jumped out. And you have a Merry Christmas.
Same to you, Larry. Hey, you said it, and you might be right on target. You know, of course, you are speaking like Jesus in signs, and you're the one that said it, and I think that was an anti-Semitic remark, though. Larry, shame on you. Shame. But actually, my helper here, the floor director, you would never guess who it is, but he's going to come here and tell us I'll tell you good night, and we will see you next Thursday, of course. He's been helping, and he's been doing a good job. So go right ahead, and it's your audience.
Good night. See you next Thursday.
All right. Good night, and we will see. Hey, go do the right thing. Larry, take care. Good night.
Good night, everybody.